Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there today. It's a crazy week for us because we have a week of community co-benefits ahead of us. So we are an Australian company who develops large-scale renewable energy projects. We were founder members of the Business Renewable Centre, and I was very fortunate a couple of years ago to give one of the opening vision statements for MECLA as I was sitting in a place I regard as a national treasure, which is Gladstone. So I'm just going to run you through some practical examples with a little bit of dreaming of what we can do around community co-benefits, building off what you've heard today. But let's just start being brutally honest with ourselves. For decades, we in Australia and in many parts of the rest of the world, we've procured on the basis of price at any cost. We haven't cared how things were made. We haven't cared where they were made. And we certainly haven't cared who they were made by, let alone what people are paid. This is now changing. The previous head of procurement at Westpac stood up at their sustainability awards about 3 years ago, pre-COVID, and said, if the heads of procurement of the Fortune 500 companies updated their procurement policies, they could change the world very rapidly. And that's what I think one of the things that MECLA allows us to think about. We're going to change the way we procure, and we're going to have these outcomes, and we can do it quickly. So racing through, we're very much an impact-focused business. It is in our DNA. There was a great article recently written called The Death of ESG, which I completely agree with. It's just in our DNA. It's not effectively something separate. It's just for everybody. There will not be a non-ESG button that you're allowed to push in a corporation or a government because it's just in our DNA. These are our principles which draw upon a lot of other people's principles. The thing I'd love to highlight is, and it's very apt during COP, so that's artwork done by Jordana Angus. Under the previous government, it languished on the SDGs data website. It's not something that people are wearing. Every Australian at COP this week should be wearing that badge because it's incredibly cool. She's done it in black and white and color, and all of the SDG goals with effectively linking it back to the art that you see there. So that's available on the SDGs website, and her name is Jordana Angus. Go forth and support her. So what I want to start with is what I call the power of the PPA. Our company, we were very fortunate to win the first Westpac PPA, and we won it because we listened to what Westpac wanted to achieve. They didn't regard that procurement of renewable energy or anything should be treated any different than the way that they look to procure. And so they set us targets, and lots of the market said, I'm giving you a good price. Why are these targets relevant? And we went much further than those targets with things like a 10-year partnership with a local high school, which is the most deprived secondary school in the whole of Australia, 41% Indigenous, 29% refugees in Wagga Wagga. Now, this has really set the tone, and we've now seen since Westpac did this lead, some corporates, not all governments, have embedded these principles, but I just see this at the beginning, that it's a matter of us taking leadership and now embedding in to what we do the goals around sustainable materials, the goals around Australian made, and high impact biodiversity outcomes. So this is the boots, which you saw earlier. We're very proud to be involved with Bowman Solar Farm and effectively this long-term commitment to a high school. And we see this as being embedded now in so many of the principles that we're seeing coming out in the sector. But this is something else to talk about. And again, my friends at WWF have been intimately involved. You may have all seen ABC's background briefing from about a year ago around the outrage in far north Queensland about the amount of rainforest being taken out by a number of wind farms that people didn't believe they'd been sufficiently told about before. And that's led to a lot of issues for the sector. And there was, and continues to be, a significant amount of outrage and backlash, because, you know, the renewable energy sector is no different than any other sector. Just because you're green doesn't mean you're good. So we've got to make sure that people tell the right things. And we can't, the world's not a postcard. In order to deal with climate change, we will need to build things. It's then a matter of where we build things and being entirely transparent and authentic about how we do it. So Realliance, together with WWF, ACF and some other groups, have effectively done this group called Renewables in Nature in Far North Queensland. We were the only developer invited. We were on probation because everyone was like saying we were the fox in the hen house. But we've been allowed to stay and contribute. And what's come out of this is effectively a charter now with the major government-owned organisations in Far North in Queensland around having much better outcomes around biodiversity and making sure that everyone is sufficiently informed. And that's the sort of, by collaborating together and partnering, the outcomes that we can have. Now, Dina talked about New South Wales. I'm absolutely delighted that what New South Wales government has come out with, taking a leaf out of what ACT and Victoria before, and then also what Biden put in originally, Build Back Better. And this is baseline and stretch targets for a whole range of social procurement activities as part of effectively rebuilding the energy sector in New South Wales. So things like employment of underrepresented groups, First Nations participation in the projects, apprenticeships. Yes, remember, we used to have them. We used to all take them. We've got to go back to learning workers and apprenticeships. So a little bit disappointing for me on local steel, but that's something to tackle. This to me becomes a template for corporates, it becomes a template for governments, and we do better and better from these baseline. But that's not all. There's amazing work being done by First Nations Clean Energy Network, and they've set out together with ANU the new best practice guidelines, which are being picked up here and globally. We're actually using them in New Zealand as well. And this is effectively how we should look to partner with First Nations communities. There's also one on green hydrogen now, which has recently been released. And then the photos to the bottom are our project, Janduri Gungi, which is a large super hybrid, which is an integrated pumped hydro hydrogen south of Gladstone. You can see photos of the signing and smoking ceremony. You may all have heard of Burnett Mary Regional Group. They've been in the press a lot the last week. A lot of the data behind what Tanya Plimasek is doing around the environmental tracking and the tool is coming from Burnett Mary Regional Group. Sheila Charlesworthy, based in Bundaberg, is just incredible what she's doing. And so we've partnered with a biodiversity group and the Indigenous group for effectively an enduring partnership where they receive financial benefits from this project and are true partners the whole way along the journey. And this is the template that we're going to see. But getting more practical, it's about ecosystems. It's not about just doing projects. And I think a number of people have said that this morning. If you take an ecosystem mentality to everything you do, you end up with far better community outcomes. So this is our projects in the Hunter. So we're the developers of Hunter Coast Offshore Wind Farm. We're also a developer of H2N, which is backbone hydrogen infrastructure. We want to have the pipelines made in Australia. We don't make those pipelines. We've never made those pipelines, but why not start now? And then we're also up on the Walker Plateau. But the big thing that happened for me last week, and everyone should be watching offshore wind, it's an incredible opportunity for Australia, is the regulations came out and the current government tweaked the original national interest test to the wording you can see below. And so this will be one of the first times that we have federal legislation that requires people to take into account when they make a decision as to who gets the licenses, regional development, job creation, Australian industries, and use of Australian goods and services. And that's how we drive these community outcomes. When we talk about partnerships, it's not all just about making things, it's about thinking about making things. So this was a workshop I was at down in Wollongong. We have phenomenal research universities. The CRCs play a huge part in driving so many things forward. I was lucky to support Monash on their journey and to net zero. But one of the things we want to do as partnerships is really look at the research opportunities. It's not just about partnering with unions and First Nations and communities, but the communities include these organisations. And I think that's a really important thing for us to be thinking about, where we can partner on research tasks. Okay, getting super practical. I hate the picture on the left. It makes me cry that effectively my industry is burying wind turbines in the same way that the mining industry buries tyres. And yes, they still do today, even when the EPA says they don't. There are tyre disposal days on many mines, and guess what happens? All the tyres in the region just happen to end up there the night before, because everyone knows the miners are about to bury the tyres. So this is the future. There's a German company, GP Renewables Group, who are repurposing. You can see the blade under the bridge. You can see the repurposed blades in the wooden, the manufactured timber. And you can see sitting in the middle of the blade, holding up this timber, which is effectively a chipboard strengthened by shredded wind blades. We are going to have lots of repurposed wind farms. We're going to have lots of repurposed solar farms. We need to invest. This is an investment issue for us. We haven't invested enough in the technology to deliver these outcomes. And finally, for me, we need to commit to be net housing positive. I keep saying to everyone, it's embarrassing for me. I just had my birthday at the weekend, and I'm embarrassed as a Kiwi living in Australia that in my lifetime, we've gone from housing affordability and security to housing inaffordability and insecurity, and building really some not great houses. Passive Place is a Melbourne-based company. We're partnering with them to build, architecturally designed, sustainable building materials, construction housing, which will end up being permanent in the communities where we're going to be building these. Where my industry is building things is not in Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane. It's out in the regions where there's extraordinarily housing pressure. We cannot force what happened in Wonthaggi when everyone came to town for the desal, and you forced out a whole lot of people out of houses because rents went through the roof. We've got to be better. We've got to think ahead earlier. On the right is the Southern Triangle. So this is something from True Green Impact Partners in Barramul and Mossvale, where they're looking to effectively really look at the factories of the future and the housing of the future. This is a schematic at the moment, but that team are forging ahead with locking in sustainable building material. And finally, my plea. Now, these images are actually from the other side of the Tasman, but I think hopefully resonate. So this is the Redwoods in Rotorua, which is where I'm from. This is an incredible walkway, which they've done through the trees. We can do this in many places, and we turn effectively, things of beauty into things of art and much higher community participation. But as I was walking there recently, the last slide was exactly the way I think, which is wood fibers into green bioadhesives. And the building below is the Scion headquarters, so the Forestry Research Institute, the same as something like the Green Triangle Industry Hub, and that's their building. And this is the future for us. We will make sustainable timber we won't be exporting logs, we won't be exporting chips. We will be making our houses and our buildings with cross-laminated timber, like Timberlinka building in South Australia. And really, we're not asking about technology. We have all the technology. We can make the green glues. We've got the renewable energy. We've got the timber. We just need a commitment from everyone to start doing it. So hopefully that was enlightening. Monica, I dulled down my passion today for you. But again, delighted to have the opportunity to present this morning.